Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part for the 16th of August 2024. My holiday is shortly coming to a close. I'm going out on a final excursion tomorrow, so that's a full day out, and I don't know if I'll be able to produce anything. I will try and do something because I want to keep this record of doing a video every day forever. But yeah, it will be a little bit different tomorrow. Anyway, we'll go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. Tim White says colossal losses for Russia. I assume the 1,330 servicemen lost in the last 24 hours includes POWs captured in Kursk, but it's not been confirmed. 73 fuel tankers and almost 60 artillery systems also destroyed. So that's what he points out. 1,330 personnel lost is obviously a high number, and I would assume that does include what's going on in Kursk, obviously, and Kursk is being very painful for the Russians. I assume that the Ukrainians are probably not fighting as much as possible all the way down the rest of the front line. So if they are losing 1,330, yes, the Russians are going to find it expensive in Donbass with their successes that they are having there for sure. But they are taking land, and it is good for the Russians, at least as they would think. But in terms of those losses overall, I'm fairly sure Kursk is going to be somewhat responsible for that, largely responsible. 12 tanks lost as well, 35 troop-carrying AFVs, as they now call them. So 35 AFVs is a high number, double the daily average. So we've seen that go up. And indeed, 12 tanks to have lost them in a day, that's over the daily average for tanks too. 59 artillery systems, so that is at least three times the daily average there. 5 multiple launch rocket systems is a very high number in that category as well. And we come to vehicles and fuel tanks, 73 of those with 16 pieces of special equipment. So that's really high numbers in both of those two categories. That is a painful day for the Russians. There's no doubt about that. Now, when we look at Andrew Perpetua's loss list, we do see that the Ukrainians have lost more than the Russians, although if you take out surveillance and comms equipment here, it looks rather different. So in terms of combat asset losses, the Russians have lost about the same as the Ukrainians probably there. It's probably a 1-to-1. It looks like there could be an expensive bit of kit up there for the Russians at the top. And then if you take out these ones at the bottom, these unknown ones at the bottom, it's not too bad for the Ukrainians considering they are on the attack. So the surveillance and comms equipment, Starlink, you can get for sort of $300 a pop these days. I would say that this whole area there is not too important. They have lost 2 bits of electronic warfare equipment. It's difficult to know whether that's highly valuable or not without any details. There's a boat that sunk, some artillery lost there, including a HIMARS that I talked about yesterday. We've seen a video for that, or I've referenced it. There's a Bogdana, the self-propelled howitzer that the Ukrainians produce indigenously. That's been destroyed, and a couple of other older bits of equipment there too. 1 single infantry fighting vehicle destroyed, a tank damaged, don't know what that is. 3 Bradleys damaged again. Now, I was talking about how the Americans are going to be giving several packages, I think, shortly. That has been announced, I think, by John Kirby even, in general. And then John P. on the threads was saying he had heard rumors through his contact in logistics that 100 Bradleys have already been sent, and 100 of maybe MRAPs and other things. So what usually happens is that they get sent, they arrive in Europe, and then they announce the packages after that. So the announcements are kind of post hoc, and I assume that's what's happening here now. Assuming that John P. is correct, my predictions were you would see Bradleys and other fighting vehicles on the next packages because Ukraine has been using them and losing them. Luckily, many of them have been damaged, but you've also seen tanks, some Abrams tanks lost. I wonder whether tanks will be on the next packages at all. But I do think it's probably time to see some Bradleys and other vehicles, especially since the Americans just have how many thousands, like thousands and thousands and thousands of Bradleys. If you see the images of them sitting out in the desert, they're just like doing nothing. Just if anyone has the ability to help the Ukrainians with fighting vehicles, it is the Americans. APCs, they've had a captured Humvee, a destroyed Striker, and a BTR 60PB there. A couple of MRAPs destroyed and one damaged, a few trucks and other bits and pieces there. And then when we go up to the Russian losses, we start with a 222 M3. That's been admitted to have been lost by the Russian MOD. And in fact, you saw the explosion on video of it hitting. And you've actually seen there are some pieces of video footage where you see that from a distance, but also one from relatively close by that was an incredible bit of footage of it exploding. So you can go and find that. There were claims from the Russians that all the crew survived, but I think there's a claim now that one crew member has died. I think they had 4 crew members on the 222 M3, if I'm correct. Right, then we come down to artillery here. BM-21 Grad, that's a multiple launch rocket system, has been damaged. 2 S7 Pion, that's a huge barrel. That's a huge piece of artillery. I think it's got the longest range for the Russians. One of those has been destroyed. We've got tanks. T-90M abandoned, so that's another of the breakthrough tanks, their most modern tank really that they use. 2 track garden sheds as well thrown in there, so 5 tanks on that list. Infantry fighting vehicles, a few of those. What have we got? 8, is it? 7? 4 out of these 7 destroyed. They're mainly BTRs, a couple of a BMP there as well. Then we have some Tornado U. Those are APCs. There are so many different variants of tornadoes. There's the multiple launch rocket. There's the equivalent to Gimlers, the equivalent to HIMARS, effectively. The Tornado S, is it? You've got Tornado G, Tornado U is the APC, a couple of those abandoned. MTLBs, a couple of those too, and then an awful lot of civilian vehicles and trucks. So the Russians losing quite a lot of kit, and one of these bombers will now go to look at personnel first. And yet again, I know I've said this for like 5 days in a row, but this is still continuing. Geek here, and one of Andrew Perpetua's team members, says massive amounts of Russian POWs taken by SBU from a bunker close to the Ukrainian border in Sverdlovkovo in Kursk. So I think this is the 102 that were taken. There's video footage of them being taken and the after effects of that. And it appears to be from this bunker complex. Now, I don't know if that was the video footage we had of going around the Russian trenches or tunnels that would seem to be quite well constructed. But there you go. I wonder if they were surrounded on day one and held out, though, through to recently, or if they were captured on day one, says Geek. But yeah, just huge numbers. There's that sort of hangar I was talking about the other day where they were lined up. Beware that there will be duplicates of footage or the same people in different positions. So these people, and then from above, and then possibly that's the same people in that kind of hangar there. And you might think it's 3 different examples of POWs caught. But however, there are just huge numbers of videos of POWs caught. Military history shows that when company-sized units agree to surrender en masse, it can cause a cascade leading to a collapse. I'm not saying it will happen, says Malcontent News, but I am saying it has happened. Hunger is enough to lead to I give up. Some POWs have reported no food for 3+ days. So not only is there this calculation as to are we going to be outnumbered militarily, is this a hopeless cause for us, therefore we should give up. There's also the idea that our morale is low, this sucks, I don't want to be here, and there's that. There's also the idea that I've heard from other units that they've given up, so that's a cascading effect talked about. And there's also within the morale remit the idea that they may not have had food for 3 days, and that plays on what you should do. And all of these things acting will lead to huge numbers of Russian troops surrendering, and that's what we are seeing. Okay, UAGS, so the General Staff, has just released their teaser of day 1 of the operation sinking Kursk. Included is a wreckage of the Kf-52. So I've talked about the Kf-52 right at the beginning that was taken down. Actually, we did see an image from that, but now there's more imagery to support that Kf-52 going down. There have been claims of all sorts of aircraft being taken down in the Kursk area. It could be as many as, I don't know, we're almost getting up to sort of 10. How much evidence do we have of those? I don't know. There is evidence of at least some of those being taken down. Number Su-34s. You've got a Me-8 and Me-28N, I think it was. Then you've got a number of Ka-52s as well. Anyway, here is one of the Ka-52s that was destroyed on day one, apparently. And there you have it, the burning wreckage of it there. Okay, one of Russia's pilots, says Tim White, of the Tu-22 M3 military jet has died that crashed. The plane capable of carrying nuclear weapons came down in Kursk, and I reported on that yesterday. It's worth noting that the loss of every Tu-22M aircraft, says Flash News, is very painful for the Russian Federation since it cannot produce them, according to Defense Express. For example, the last Tu-22M3 long-range bomber was released back in 1993. In general, the Russian Federation has about 30 of these. I said 27 yesterday was one of the sources I read, but not all of them are in combat and flight condition, and that's important. So I don't know whether losing just one will have any effect on the Russian ability to commit to these bombings and missile releases, but it might do. And any more of those would be very useful for the Ukrainians. Now, we have heard that I've reported previously that the Ukrainians have lost more equipment in the Kursk direction than the Russians. Last time I spoke, it was 29 against 22. And then I hinted at this new one out yesterday. So here it is that the Ukrainians have added 22 of their own losses, or the Russians, have, if you like, have added 22 Ukrainian losses. And the Russians have only lost 5 since that last one. So now it's 51 Ukrainian losses to 27 Russian losses. So you're moving up towards 2-1, where it was just above 1-1, sort of 1.2-1 or something like that. Now we're almost at 2-1. So this is what you would expect, but the Ukrainians would really want to minimize their losses compared to the Russian losses. It could also be that there's just not that much Russian equipment in the area. Yes, they've destroyed a few columns, and it might also be that these don't include the I wonder if they do. So let's have a look at the transport. Yeah, so it does include transport vehicles, and 15 there. So yeah, hardly any fighting vehicles because there weren't that many there at all. So the Ukrainians are attacking there precisely because it's weakly defended. So they aren't going to be destroying a huge number of Russian vehicles, but they themselves are going on in with huge amounts of vehicles. So the Russians defending are going to be trying to take them out with helicopters. We've seen Ka-52 footage, although some of it is a bit dubious because it looks like it's from elsewhere. But there has been Ka-52 footage. They are going to be hitting things with Iskanders and whatever they can, and of course ATGMs and mines and so on and so forth. So there you go. That's the extra Ukrainian equipment that's been added, and mainly APCs, which again you would expect you're transferring troops from Ukraine, from Sumy into Kursk to commit to military activity. These are the vehicles that are going to be primarily hit. Some Strikers, BMPs, Marders, infantry fighting vehicles as well. HIMARS taken out too, as we've seen. This is not just from Kursk. This is also from over the border in Sumy that is to do with these strikes on Kursk. So that's why the HIMARS is included in there. We've got a T90 tank, a T90M tank that was captured, and a T80 BVM that was also captured there. So anyway, it's going in the favour of the Russians there, but that's what you would expect. It seems, says War Vehicle Tracker, that a Ukrainian 5P-73 TEL, so that's a transporter erector launcher, it's a surface-to-air missile launcher, of the Polish S-125. So you've got S-300s, S-125, you've got S-400s. This is going to be an older bit of kit. The newer SC, loaded with 4x 5V-27 missiles, was destroyed by a Russian Iskander-M somewhere in Odessa. Actually, it's not in Odessa. He corrects later to say it was in Sumy. So this would be one that was in support of the activities into Kursk. Due to direct impact on the tail, the rest of the vehicle is completely disintegrated. A burning missile is visible. So the Ukrainians have lost an S-125 as well, and you'd see that added to the list, I'm sure, the list we just seen going forward. And that happened between actually where the Ukrainians are attacking into Kursk, and also where you've got the two Kursk the Russian initiatives into Kharkiv Oblast, sorry, from Belgorod. You've also got activity that's taking place around here, so that air defense system could be supporting, any of those, I guess. Although the range isn't, well, I don't know what the range of the S-125 is, to be perfectly frank. But there you go. It is likely protecting a planned incursion into Belgorod. So there's this theory that the Ukrainians are going to be attacking into Belgorod around here. Lots of different theories going around at the moment as to what the Ukrainians are going to be trying. Now, reports this morning of another Russian column that was badly hit last night in Koronovo. There claims that Koronovo is pretty much surrounded, or there's fighting in it, or it's under control of the Ukrainians. So lots of different claims coming out about that. That's one of the towns on the. I guess if I just to remind you where Koronovo is, that's over here. Just on the edge of Andrew Perpetua. This was updated 11 hours ago, so this might not be true anymore, but there was, claims of fighting in Koronovo. Could be that the Ukrainians have some purchase there. But anyway, a Russian column might have been damaged, destroyed. I mean, it says badly hit. It's apparently similar to the Rilsk attack last week. So that's where HIMARS completely took out a column, and anywhere between 100 and 500 Russian soldiers died in that. No proofs yet, but several Russian bloggers are mentioning it. Most likely we'll know more today. It's coming from War Translated's Dmitry. Then there is this claim that HIMARS has destroyed a Pantsir S1 in the Kherson region. And I include this because Pantsir is a pretty high value, decent bits of kit. The first blow came at a distance from the car and only scared the crew, who promptly changed their location. Then there was a hit by a second missile, which caused the detonation of the missile. I won't show it to you because I might get in trouble, but Pantsir S1 being taken out is good news for the Ukrainians. Ukrainian HIMARS hit and destroyed a training base of Russian forces, says War Monitor, near the Kursk region, which was being used to regroup and form units to go into the region. Now, if that's happened, and I know nothing more than that, that's going to be potentially a really high value target for the Ukrainians, taking out a lot of troops at one time. You would imagine there are going to be many staging posts around Kursk where they're getting ready to send troops in to defend Kursk, the Russians. And these are going to be prime targets for the Ukrainians. HIMARS is going to be very active around there doing that. Sorry, but these claimed ratios, says Jakub Yanovsky, who is guy now responsible for Oryx. But he's saying, well, okay, what's he talking about? There's this claim that Ukrainian troops are still getting outfired by Russian artillery by a ratio of about 8-1. That's down from about 20-1. That was the case before Congress passed a $60 billion US military aid bill for Ukraine in June, Ukrainian officials said. So these are Ukrainian officials saying that they're still being outfired 8-1 by the Russians. And Jakub Yanovsky saying, sorry, but these claimed ratios are just BS. And most likely they are local. There are localized exceptions. So you get places along the front line where it's basically very, very variable, isn't it? So you can't extrapolate from one single place across the whole front line, and you can't extrapolate from a generalization down to a particular area either. But in general, he reckons that the Russians do have numerical advantage, but it's only about 2 or maybe 3-1. And a lot of the Russian shelling is less accurate. And so that's someone who's working in OSINT and checking out lots of data. It's interesting. So one of the reasons the Ukrainians might be saying that is because they desperately need this continual supply of artillery ammunition from their allies. So if they keep saying, "Oh, woe is us, we are really suffering here," it's at 8-1, and that's not great. And of course, that's what it was like going back to, even towards the end of the lack of ammunition coming from, or the lack of support coming from the US in terms of their aid package. Even when they did get that aid package finalized, it took quite a long time for that to come through, and it was coming through in dribs and drabs, and the EU provision was also coming through in dribs and drabs. And even at that time of stuff coming through, the claim was sort of 7-8-1. But it's interesting that Jakub Yanovsky is saying, no, not happy with that. Don't believe it. It's actually more like 2 or 3-1. And that it wouldn't surprise me if that was pretty true. Now, I talked about Perfidy. There were a couple of claims that Russians had found Russian Russian uniforms out in the woods, and there was a claim that the Ukrainians took a village by going in uniform, in Russian uniform, sorry, and then putting their Ukrainian bands on, and then saying, right, we're in control of the village. And I was saying, this is interesting because we had a whole thread from Mick Ryan about how the Ukrainians are really adhering to international law when it comes to warfare, and the Russians aren't. Although there's this possible example of perfidy going on in Kursk. And a few people saying some really interesting comments with regard to that. And I was saying, look, it's not the worst. We've seen many films where this has happened throughout history. You can talk about World War II, whether it's fictionalized or not, but you got the kind of Dirty Dozen and Where Eagles Dare and all that kind of stuff. Berthold says here, perfidy, that is how Russia took Crimea and the Donbass. Why should Ukraine respect perfidy? That's a really good point. Of course, the entire 2014 invasion of the Donbass and Crimea was done with little green men who had taken off their insignia. And that was wide-scale perfidy on just a huge level. That was egregious. I'd agree that was egregious because Russia just denied that they had anything to do with it, and these were local freedom fighters that had suddenly got hold of massive amounts of armor and artillery and infantry fighting vehicles, so on and so forth. And you're thinking, hang on, you can't just buy that off eBay, and that's what they're claiming. That's a huge amount of armor that you've just got, and no freedom fighting force suddenly gets that much armor within a month of starting to be in existence. You don't go, a month later, look how much stuff we got. And it's all Soviet era kit that appears to have just come over the border from Russia. So that was a form of perfidy that was deeply problematic. A unit going into a village in Russian uniform and then putting bands on, but not actually fighting in that uniform is a different matter. And in fact, that's exactly what Andy says here. Just the YouTube studio doesn't give me a very good idea. No, it's just Andy. So Andy says fighting in an enemy uniform is against the rules of war. Traveling in enemy uniforms with the intention of changing into other uniforms before fighting is not. It's regarded as a ruse of war. The attempt on Eisenhower's life during the Battle of the Bulge is a good example, but battlefield justice can be a bit arbitrary. I mean, as I said yesterday, these rules are pretty arbitrary. It has to be said. I mean, this is trying to put rules on systematic murdering of other human beings. That's what war is, right? trying to regulate that, say, well, you can do this, but you can't do that, is at times a little bit arbitrary. And then we have someone else here who is, let's have a look, Old Man of Crypto says the following. Think it's funny that they immediately claim it's Ukrainians who are using those uniforms in the woods. It could never be the uniforms of Russian soldiers who took them off, put on civilian clothes and melted into the refugee column. I hadn't considered this, and that is far more plausible than how would the Ukrainians get Russian uniforms into the woods where the Russians are with a view to them putting it on. Surely they just have it with them. So actually, the idea that the Russians are coming across Russian uniforms in the woods, it's far more likely that those are Russian soldiers who have taken off their uniforms and then melted into civilian evacuee crowds. Now, we've heard that 42 conscripts have gone missing in the area. So you put two and two together and you get 4 here. I mean, it makes far more sense. So I really agree with that. Thanks for that, Old Man of Crypto. That's much more obviously the rationale, I would think, of what's going on, or why that uniform would be found. Those uniforms would be found in wood. And then here we've got Joseph Blunderville saying, I'm not convinced using enemy uniforms when talking to civilians is perfidy. The language I've read suggests you have to be involved in an attack or shielding yourself from attack, like trying to deceive spotters, which is what your other man said, Andy. If they're taking over a town, it sounds to me like they're deceiving non-combatants just to take control of a town that's behind the front line most efficiently, rather than trying to deceive the adversary army. I haven't looked at the footage, but I'd like to see more in-depth analysis before making a judgment about whether it is or isn't perfidy. In any event, using deception to avoid an armed fight sounds like a win to me. Perfidy, being a war crime, is about trying to demotivate armies from shooting at ambulances and third parties, so as long as we're not creating an unintended consequence, I'm fine fine with interpreting the letter of the law in a lenient way. Again, a brilliant comment there from Joseph Blunderville. Just really like these comments, and I have now fully changed my mind on that perfidy thing. Not that I was like strongly thinking it was a problem, but yeah, I would say that it's probably not perfidy when you're talking about the guys going to the village and then putting on their armbands. And in terms of finding the stuff, the Russian uniforms in the woods, that's far more likely to be Russians doing that. Okay, explosions. So going on to distant strikes, there was some big news coming out last night from Crimea. At the time of it happening, Tim White reporting explosions heard in Crimea. All the lights on Crimean Bridge went off. The fire seems to have broken out near there. Also explosions near Simferopol. In the Kamenka area, posters online report something's burning. In Kerch by the bridge, there were earlier reports Ukraine had hit an air defense system on Mount Mithridates. However, it may have been purely falling debris. Of course, the Russian installed governor of Sevastopol says everything was shot down. And then later, another explosion in occupied Crimea. Difficult to tell if it was air defense or a hit far away, but this was in Chornomorsky and Uzkaya Bay area. Then helicopters were flying, presumably trying to knock out drones. And we'll come back to that in a second. What else did he say? Claims from a Ukrainian spokesman this morning that they've hit again a ferry crossing in Kerch. Serhiy Brechuk says that they likely struck another boat in Chornomorsky on the other side of occupied territory. None of this is yet confirmed. Meanwhile, satellites have picked up fires near Kerch. Whether this was a Panzer air defense system or falling debris is as yet unknown. And then is talking about helicopters, Russian helicopters over Chornomorsky. And it looks like, well, we'll come to that in a second, why that would be the case. And I don't know if there's any further details. No, I don't think so. Oh, hello. What's going on there? Oh, yeah, that's the one in Donetsk of the Galaxy Mall that's up in flames. No update on what damage was actually caused in the overnight attack on occupied Crimea. Russia claims it stopped 12 ATACMS missiles fired at the illegal Crimean bridge. It's highly unlikely they could shoot down all 12. The bridge itself was closed for 5 hours, causing a jam. Two other Crimea-related stories in Alushta on the south coast. Various villages are without power, no reason given, but probably due to overnight attacks. Meanwhile, Russia says its underground network filmed Ukraine planes in Mykolaiv region, which attacked Crimea. So wow, that's pretty good stuff. And then this is what I was going to show you, but actually Tim White's got all of this all in one place, so I might as well just say it here. So the ongoing propaganda war of the waves continues too. Various stories and videos have been pumped out by both sides about landings on Crimea or the Kinburn Spit. Today, Russia says its Mi-8 and Kiev-29 helicopters, so the naval versions, destroyed 5 boats heading for Crimea, but we don't know the date. So there is video footage to suggest that a bunch of the Magura V5 drones, the Sea Babies, have been stopped on the way to Crimea. On a similar note, actually, no, we'll go on. So Russia claims Ukraine attempted ATACMS attack on Crimean Bridge. 12 missiles apparently shot down. Next, reports drones attacked Crimea. According to unconfirmed reports, the port of Kerch came under attack. Fires broke out during the night near the city where the installation of air defense systems had been noticed earlier. According to Crimean Wind Channel, Panzer S-1 surface-to-air missile system may have been hit. So there is some imagery coming out. Not quite sure what has been hit, if anything. Defense intelligence has reported that Ukrainian Magura V5 drones hit 18 Russian ships in a year and a half. So this is not last night, but just a general idea that these drones have been very successful. According to the intelligence service, Ukrainian-made Magura V5 maritime attack drones have a range of more than 800 kilometers, a speed of 80 kilometers per hour, and a warhead weighing 250 kilograms, although I've heard it's gone up to 900 kilograms with some, and potentially with surface-to-air, missiles on board, like man-pads. That would have been useful, because the claims, as mentioned, were that these helicopters took out 5 Magura V5 drones heading towards Crimean Peninsula last night. So that's what Tim White was talking about, a video capturing one exploding. Now, the Kyiv Independent reports that Ukraine struck a ferry crossing in occupied Crimea and a boat in Krasnodar Krai. Preliminary reports indicate that Ukraine struck a ferry crossing in the city of Kerch overnight, as well as a boat to the community of Chornomorsk in Russia's Krasnodar Krai. Now, there's no information about immediately available about the extent of the damage. It's not immediately clear what boat was struck or whether it's a military target or not. So we've seen previously three rail ferries that were taken out across the Kerch Straits, and that's incredibly vital because they were the only three that would allow railway cargo to cross the Kerch Strait if it wasn't going on the bridge. And apparently, the bridge is unable to still take very heavy rail cargo, although we have seen rail cargo go across there. But it's all about possibly shaping activities. For something that might happen in the future, or just merely taking out Russian military logistics. According to pro-Russian channels, Ukrainian armed forces are preparing, so this is that kind of shaping activities I was talking about, a massive strike on Crimea in September. Additionally, Russian sources claim that Crimean Bridge was allegedly attacked overnight with 12 ATACMS. They were, of course, all shot down. So lots of rumors about this being a case of shaping for a large attack onto Crimea. A major fire has been taking place at the Galactica shopping center in Donetsk after arrivals. The Russians claim civilian casualties. Some explosions may be heard in the background. That's not certain. I don't know whether this is a case of drones or missiles and them being shot down by air defenses and falling on a mall and that mall burning down. There are some claims that there were military targets within the mall, or who knows. But yeah, that is a massive fire that's taking place there, and that whole mall has gone down, and that's in Donetsk, occupied Donetsk. So we'll have to wait to see what went on there. Hopefully, civilians were not killed in that. And Sarin reports that in Kursk, HIMARS strikes on a bridge over the same river have continued today. So I reported yesterday on there being a couple of holes in on this bridge. And in fact, Romanov, I think it was, the Russian mill blogger, was driving past it and did a battle damage assessment. Some people saying that actually allowed the Ukrainians to know exactly what damage had been done to that bridge and hit it again. Some people claiming that Romanov had done Ukraine a solid one there. So HIMARS strikes at that bridge, and the Ukrainian army are trying to cut off supply roads to Tekhino area south of the river. And there are three bridges. Okay, let's look at the damage to the bridge over the same river located in the settlement of Glushkovo. This was supposedly done by HIMARS, but my goodness, I don't know what HIMARS they use, but this bridge has now not just got a couple of holes like there was yesterday. You can see 4 holes there. You can see some much more serious damage being done to the bridge. That's it, just where it's located. You see Koronovo there. So this is quite far out there, but the idea is that they are shaping for a potential encirclement. That's what some people are claiming. Early today in Russia's Kursk Oblast, Ukrainian HIMARS successfully dropped the bridge over the same river in Glushkovo, effectively cutting off Russian troops in the town. And that's all located on these maps. You can go and check it all out. Of note, the bridge at Glushkovo carried the only safe paved road to run south of the same in the Glushkovsky district. Russian forces will now have to take a meandering dirt roads to reach the river crossings at either Zvanoye or Karij, and Ukrainian forces have targeted both. Yeah, so this is, again, possibly some good moves by the Ukrainians. Roman Alekin says that the bridge has just been destroyed and Ukrainian liberation forces are implementing the plan to isolate the Glushkovo district. War Translator said Russian military bloggers Romanov and Saponkov driving today over a bridge out of Glushkovo, which has been under HIMARS shelling for 2 days. In the burned Gazelle, 2 volunteers from DPR are believed to have died. So, this is Romanov again, possibly helping out the Ukrainians for battle damage assessment. And now next are reporting that about 700 Russian soldiers may be encircled due to the blowing of the bridge. There are also reports from Russian media of the strikes of another bridge in the village of Zvanoye in the Kursk region. There are no official comments from representatives of the Ukrainian or the Defense Ministry. So lots to consider there. That's pertinent to Kursk. Okay, Phillips O'Brien just says in general, That sound you are hearing gently in the background is a deflation of the escalation argument used by many to deprive Ukraine of what it needs. Just remember this, though. He says 2 years ago, Elmo, so that's what people call Elon Musk stopped Ukraine from sending a jet ski with some explosives into Sevastopol. So you remember he turned off the Starlink or didn't allow it to be used. He geofenced it so it couldn't be used into Crimea, even though he's allowed it to be used in the Donbass by the Russians and not turned it off for them. Anyway, he stopped the Ukrainians from doing an attack on Sevastopol because he thought it would start World War III. Well, what have we seen since then? We've seen the Black Sea Fleet basically either destroyed or made to move down to Novorossiysk or even the port in Abkhazia in Georgia. We have seen, there have been Kilo class submarines sunk, and another one sunk, a couple of weeks ago, or it's the same one that was struck. We've seen ships sunk. We have seen the Kerch Bridge blown up and repaired. We have seen Sevastopol hit time and time again with these maritime drones, these naval drones. Again, last night we've seen it. We've seen all sorts of cruise missile targets taken out up and down the occupied regions of Russia. And we've seen strikes into Russia. We've seen the invasion into Kursk. What's happened? What the Russians done? Nothing. Tumbleweed. So these kind of Russian appeasers like Elon Musk saying, oh no, it'll start World War III, can go and take a long walk off a short pier. Because of made-up nuclear fears, says Phillips O'Brien. Anyway, I just thought I haven't had a rant for a few days. President Zelensky announces plans to offer Ukrainian citizenship to foreign volunteers and their families. The initiative aims to recognize the contributions to defending Ukraine's independence of the foreigners serving in defense forces. Of course, he needs to be thinking about population crises, about people who might be able to pay tax. So those foreign volunteers who have been fighting for Ukraine, offering them and their family citizenship is a way of not only thanking them, but securing families in Ukraine going forward. Today, says War Translated, Russian Telegram channels are actively discussing the shortage of personnel and butcher generals. A military blogger, Vorenko Kotonok, specifically noted the situation with senseless assaults. And this is interesting, in the Donetsk direction. So he says, here's the thing, a colleague again talks about the butcher commanders, but I'm having a hard time finding words on the matter. It's customary for us to blame generals for everything. It's not without reason, and it's clear why. There are always enough cannibals with stripes. But the trouble is the average officer, or the tactical level, so to speak, from platoon to regiment, often does not protect personnel at all. They learn bad things from some of their superiors, and this is not a figure of speech. We have officers who consider their subordinates and personnel as a whole to be the lowest link in the food chain. So much for saving the people. Who, where, when? There are a ton of examples, and not only in a Donetsk direction, although it is there that the desire to get a rank on a general sometimes turned ambitious and purposeful officers into terrible commanders. There are many strange things in this war. The time for analysis has not yet come, but there is also something to tell about how the three of us took the enemy's company support, about how the company goes on the attack without an evacuation team. How can this be, since Russians don't abandon their own? But there is only one conclusion, and it is simple. Fewer butcher commanders mean a greater chance of not losing in this undeclared war. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Okay, in other news, a cargo ship that is a grain cargo ship is on fire. Don't know why, near Odessa. I hope that hasn't been hit by anything, but details of the incident details are currently unknown. In the Russian Federation, there's a massive power outage in Primorsk region due to an accident in a generator, according to Russian media. It's reported that traffic lights are not working in the cities, the internet slowed down, movement of electric trains has been suspended. And here we have, War Translated talking about the Russian city of Vladivostok, and almost all of Primorsk region were left without electricity after local electricity engineers training. People got stuck in lifts, electric trains stopped. So things like this seem to be happening quite a lot in Russia. It is, I include this because there's the element, there is the idea that Russia is somewhat crumbling. It's very fragile, I think. And we're going to finish on this. So Putin has a meeting with the Russian Security Council discussing the new technical solutions used during the special military operation. Still can't call it a war. Goodness me, it's ridiculous. Grow up. As far as I can see, Medvedev is there. Gerasimov is not. Belousov is present via video, Putin said. We're back to this. Where is Gerasimov? He's a commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and he's not present at a security meeting. He's supposedly lost his role in the Kursk region to Bortnikov, and someone was saying that actually Bortnikov was then replaced by Dyumin. Where is Gerasimov? I don't think he's well. I think that strike in Crimea did him in, and he is in there in name only, and sometimes in picture only, but he's not really there. And in this meeting, he really isn't there. Why would you not have your commander-in-chief present at such a meeting? Anyway, answers on a postcard. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Sorry it's a long one. Take care. Speak soon.